I pray that you're not like I am and that oftentimes you have to learn your lessons the hard way. Last evening, my wife and I had a great opportunity to go out with some friends to a restaurant. And upon arriving there, I immediately and quickly ordered a sweet tea. And my wife warned me against that. She told me, she said, "You don't need that. You don't need the caffeine in that. That's going to mess your heart up and that's going to cause you to be restless." But I wanted it so bad, I denied all of that and said I'd be just fine. Well, I felt that way. We got in last night about 8:30 or so, and I tried to bed down, but here it is nearly 8:30 the next morning. I haven't slept a wink. I've not even dozed off all night long, so I'm extremely tired, and basically it's probably going to ruin my entire day because I'm not going to be able to accomplish what I'd hoped that I could today. So again and once again, I've learned the lesson the hard way. But I understand that's the way we've always been, seemingly. In Genesis chapter 2 and 3, we find the record of Adam and Eve. And in Genesis 2 and verse 17, we learn that God told them immediately upon arriving there in the garden as he had put them there, God tells them immediately that they are not to partake of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Of course, them not understanding or not willing to understand what God intended by that, they denied that and they learned the hard way that God meant what he said. God had promised them that they would surely die, and some would argue whether that implied physical death or spiritual. I'll tell you, it certainly implied spiritual at the very least, but nevertheless, they learned that God meant what he said. We also learned in that same context that they learned another lesson the hard way, and that is that oftentimes those closest to you can encourage you to stumble, fall, or even sin. And that's exactly what Eve did in Adam. Now, certainly Adam was responsible for his own sin, responsible for his own wrongdoing. But when you began that, it was all simply based on someone whom he loved, probably the most in the entirety of the world. But yet she caused him to fall. So we too must be careful not to have to learn even that lesson the hard way. And then the third lesson I think about, they probably learned the hard way there in the garden. And that was simply the fact that not everything that looks good and tastes good actually is good for you. Sometimes I engorge myself over food or some kind of drink like that sweet tea last night. But I certainly learned, as they did on that day, the consequences for partaking of such are certainly not worth it. They're not worth it in the end. Now, certainly Adam and Eve had learned all of these lessons, and they learned them the hard way. So it's my prayer today that I'll be better attuned to what's going on around me, that I'll be more attentive to the things that are set before me, and I'll make better decisions today than I ever have in the past. But more than that sweet tea last evening especially, we need to focus our minds on our spiritual lives and make sure that none of those spiritual lessons need to be learned the hard way. Look to the Bible, look for its examples, learn the lessons through those lives, those that have already been lived, and take the advice of faithful Christians who've been there before and help them, allow them to help you to be guided so that you would also know how to learn your lessons the easier way, which is to hear God and keep his commandments. This has been your daily dose, and I pray that you've been encouraged.